of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And he's got 11,000 soldiers approximately, and their goal is to try to survive this horrible winter at a small village 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia known as Valley Forge. Okay, so General Washington's Continental Army are going to settle in for the winter just 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Washington and his 11,000 American soldiers are going to try to survive this horrible winter at a small village known as Valley Forge. Now, what's the biggest problem for Washington is the supply line system that's provided by the Second Continental Congress is totally broken down. And a supply line is how Congress pays to get supplies to the Continental Army. Supplies, ammunition, equipment, food, those types of things. Okay? The supply line system provided by Congress to get the troops their supplies and their medicine, their blankets and their food and those types of things is completely broken down. So at Valley Forge, these Continental soldiers have no supplies, they have no medicine, they have no blankets, and they have very little, if any, food. So that would be tough, especially during a tough winter. So the supply line system that's provided by Congress to supply the Continental Army with the essentials is completely broken down, and as a result, the soldiers at Valley Forge have no supplies, no medicine, no blankets, no food. Men are actually eating tree bark to survive and melting snow for drinking water. They have nothing. They're eating tree bark and they are melting snow. It's virtually an ice box. We're complaining about how cold it was in here yesterday. If you can imagine, this is an ice box, and what else would be good to have besides food and water?
Hot chocolate.
Well, what's probably a place of your body that you want to be warm? But what'll make your entire body cold? Feet and head. So they have no shoes, they have no caps or whatever, they don't have any clothing. Matter of fact, there's no shoes or appropriate clothing, and Valley Forge is virtually an icebox. So soldiers are going to die here for two reasons. One, they're going to die of disease because they don't have any medicine, and some are going to freeze to death. I mean, it's that bad. They have nothing. Matter of fact, of the 11,000 soldiers that were stationed at Valley Forge, about 2,500 are going to die during the course of the winter from either disease or freeze to death. About 2,500 out of 11,000 are going to die. Now, Congress is trying to fix this broken supply system, but it's going to take too much time. General Washington needs food for his men now. He's in a very bleak situation. He's not sure how many of his men are going to survive this winter to fight on in the Revolutionary War after spring comes. He's very concerned. And this is another thing that happened. It's just like Ryland said, of destiny. General Washington has no idea that a rescue party is actually heading his way. There's a rescue party. It has nothing to do with the United States of America. It doesn't have anything to do with the American colonies, the Continental Congress. It has to do with an Oneida Indian tribe and their war chief, Han Yeri. That's the rescue party that's coming, is an Oneida Indian tribe and their war chief, Han Yeri.
How do you spell that? It's
Yeah,
on
it
the
should be on the
sheet.
sheet. So Washington has no idea the rescue party is going to save the day. They're heading their way to Valley Forge under the leadership of Oneida Indian War Chief Han Yeri. Now, these Indians that are caught in the middle in the Revolution, what are they kind of forced to do? If you're the Indian tribe and you see this conflict between British and Americans and you're going to live with the result, what are you going to have to choose to do? You got three options.
Choose a side.
You can choose the American side, you can choose the British side, or you can try to maybe hang in the middle and see what happens. But really you're going to have to choose sides. The Oneida Indian tribe was one of the few Indian tribes that chose the American side, because Who would you choose if you had a choice? Who you think is going to win? How's it looking so far? Who's it look like has most of the advantages so far? The British. Okay, so the Oneida Indian tribe, and it's very courageous of Han Yeri to choose to side with the Patriots rather than the British, because if they choose to side with the Patriots and the British win the war, what do they come under? That consequences of a loss. Okay, so this was pretty interesting that Han Yeri had chosen his Oneida Indian tribe to support the Patriot side. And the reason he does is because he thinks it's in the best interest of his people. He believes the Americans are going to win. He was one of the few Indian tribes that thought that. Most, as I mentioned, sided with the British. Now, what Chief Yeri and his warriors are carrying to Valley Forge is 600 bushels of white corn. 600 bushels of white corn. And they are going to end up traveling over 400 miles to Valley Forge, which was a long distance in those times. They didn't jump in the F-150 and drive 75 miles an hour, right, with the corn in the back. How'd they get this corn there? They packed it. And they packed it 400 miles, 600 bushels, to Valley Forge. Now, what do they have to avoid along the way? What's that? British soldiers and probably enemy Indian tribes that have chosen to side with the British. So they've got to weave their way these 400 miles with these 600 bushels of corn to avoid both British soldiers, who wouldn't have any problem killing them for their corn, would they? Or would either their Indian enemies? Well, the white corn is a lifesaver for Washington's starving soldiers. And it allows them to hang on until Congress fixes those broken supply lines and gets them the other equipment they need to survive, such as clothing, medicine, etc. But the white corn is going to be enough to keep them in survival mode until those supply lines are fixed. Okay? That'll take us to our last subtopic of this test material, which is tough discipline and aid from France comes for the Americans. Tough discipline and aid from France comes for the Americans. Tough discipline and aid from France comes for the Americans. Now, once weather clears and the soldiers have recovered from their ills of Valley Forge, General Washington's soldiers are going to learn something new: discipline. They are going to be taught discipline. So once they get through this tough winter, they recovered from their ills of Valley Forge, the remaining soldiers are going to get something that they have not been used to, and that's discipline. Now, it isn't General Washington that's going to instill this discipline into his soldiers. He's going to ask for the help of Prussian soldier Baron von Steuben. Prussian is like Russian with a P in front. Okay? So General Washington is going to turn to a Prussian soldier by the name of Baron von Steuben. And it will be Steuben who will provide this discipline for the Continental Army. So Washington's going to turn and ask for the help of Prussian soldier Baron von Steuben. Now at this time, von Steuben is 47 years old, and he is the drill master of the century. And he's also known as an unemployed soldier of fortune in search of a cause. What is he in essence? He's a what? He's like the Hessians. He's a mercenary. But he's unemployed. So what does Washington do? He employs him. And he employs this 47-year-old drill master, this soldier of fortune, to whip his motley patriots into a well-oiled fighting machine. Okay? So Washington hires this Prussian soldier by the name of Baron von Steuben, 47-year-old drill master, soldier of fortune, a mercenary, to whip his motley patriots into a well-oiled fighting machine. Von Steuben gets the job done, and once he finishes his training with the Continental Army, these soldiers are going to leave Valley Forge a professional fighting army. Professional fighting army. Now, I told you that the American victory at Saratoga in October of 1777 was a turning point in the Revolutionary War, right? One of the reasons it was because all these foreign countries sat behind going, Jesus, I don't know if I'm going to support these Americans if they're going to get their butt kicked. You know what I mean? Then I get in bad haste with Britain, and oh boy. Well, the victory at Saratoga gave France enough confidence that the Americans could win the Revolutionary War that they decided that they would help out. Okay? They decided they would help out. So the victory at Saratoga convinces the King of France to at least listen to the possibility of helping out the Americans in their struggle for freedom. So he's going to have to meet with somebody to discuss what France can do. So who do you think the King of France invited to France to kind of court an alliance between France and the American colonies? Not George Washington. Not a guy in the ID sheet. What? Benjamin Franklin. Very good. So early in 1778, the King of France welcomed Benjamin Franklin to France to court an alliance between France and America. So Benjamin Franklin travels across the Atlantic and meets with the King of France. Now, he didn't just fly over there in a few hours. Obviously, it took him some time. So after Franklin got over there, and after he visited with the king, and they talked about lots of things, finally on February 6th of 1778, the colonists and France signed two separate treaties. They signed two separate treaties. On February 6th, 1778, the colonists in France signed two separate treaties. Actually, one had nothing to do with the Revolutionary War. And the first treaty was what we call a commercial treaty. Commercial treaty they signed, which really had not much to do with the Revolutionary War. But it did help court the alliance. It put them together in an alliance. Anybody know what a commercial treaty might be about? What's that? Yeah, basically what the commercial treaty did is both sides, both France and America, agreed to give each other favored treatment in matters of trade. Very good. So basically they said, hey, we'll be trading buddies, and we'll work exclusively together and give each other preference, which really had nothing to do, and this treaty isn't worth a doggone if what? If the American colonies lose. But at least that was part of the alliance. Hey, when you win this American Revolution, we'll give each other favored treatment in matters of trade. That was a commercial treaty. The treaty that mattered as far as the Revolution was the Treaty of Alliance. It was called the Treaty of Alliance. Treaty of Alliance. Now, in a treaty like this, France is going to agree to something, and in return, America is going to agree to something, right? So this is what this treaty is about. So I'm going to tell you what France agreed to do for the Americans and what the Americans agreed to do for France in return. Okay? First of all, France agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. France agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. They would recognize that they are an independent, free state. Okay? So France agreed to recognize the independence of the American colonies. The second thing that France agreed to do in the Treaty of Alliance is to wage war upon Great Britain until America was free. To wage war against Great Britain until America was free. Now, the Americans have to give something in return for that, do they not? for the recognition of independence, and they would agree to wage war upon Great Britain until America is free. So America had to agree to these two things. One, they agreed to defend the French West Indies. America agreed to defend the French West Indies. Now that'll come up later in the history. Now, anybody know what the West Indies are? Having a hell of a hurricane down there right now. Caribbean, areas in that area, the Caribbean. Well, France owned that. And that was pretty close to America, right? And so basically what America's saying is, if you help us win our freedom, we will make sure none of your enemies ever assault or try to take the West Indies, which were a French possession. At that time called the French West Indies. So the first thing America agreed to do is they would defend the French West Indies. Now that'll come back in history because that's going to be an issue we'll get to way later. But when I say to you, remember that back when we talked about defending the French West Indies? Okay, the second thing America agreed to do is once the war was over, they would not make a separate peace with Great Britain. They would not make a separate peace with Great Britain. And what I mean by a separate peace is they would not support Great Britain and not support France. So if France and Great Britain ever got into a conflict, who was America expected to support? France. Okay, so that was the second part of it, is they would not make a separate peace with Great Britain. Now, this is pretty interesting, because France really gave the United States two big things after this treaty was signed. First of all, they showered the colonists with soldiers, supplies, and equipment. The modern equivalent of $13 billion. That's what it would have been in today's money. So they committed financially big time. So France showered the colonists with soldiers, with supplies and equipment, which would be the modern equivalent to about $13 billion. Now the money was important, but the next thing they supplied might have even been more important. They supplied a spunky young officer by the name of Marquis de Lafayette. And he was going to provide leadership to the Continental Army. He was going to come over here and help lead the colonial army. Anybody heard of Marquis de Lafayette? Somebody must have done a paper on it. Who did a paper on it? Did he come over and help the Americans?
Yeah.
You bet he did. Yeah. But he was big. He was a very good, strong young leader and would prove to be a great benefit for the American Revolution and the cause for freedom. Now, at this point in our lecture, the American Revolution has been basically fought what geographic area? North.
New England.
When we get it in the northern area, New York, New England, Pennsylvania, etc. When we get into part 2, it's going to shift to the south. We haven't talked hardly at all about the American Revolution in the south. Now let me give you a precursor here. Why is it going to be difficult to win the American Revolution in the south? What are in the south that's going to help make the cause tough?
Open land.
Not geographic. Think about population. Loyalists. Who's in the south? Wealthy merchants. Who are they trading with? Great Britain. Do they have anything to gain from independence? Matter of fact, it's a detriment to their profits. So it's going to be very difficult to fight the American Revolution in the South because of the number of loyalists that are in the South who are enjoying a great prosperous life right now because of trade with Great Britain. Okay? Now, here's kind of what our schedule is going to be. How many people are not going to be here tomorrow? Okay, what's going on tomorrow? Football? Okay, we are going to watch a video tomorrow. And it's very good. It's about what we talked about here. Monday, I will not be here. I am going to give you a written review. In other words, I'm going to give you a review sheet written. You are going to have Monday to work on that. Okay, you're going to be working individually on that. I don't care if you whisper a little bit, but I'll tell the sub to make sure that you're doing that. Okay, I will get back on Tuesday and review that review with you. Make sure you got what you need, and we'll have a test Wednesday. That's how it works. So, that review, don't throw that away and make sure that you get it completed. Because when I come to class Monday or Tuesday, I may say, hand that in and I'll check you off and then I'll give it back to you for the review. It's not something you don't do. It's something that I want completed when I get there Tuesday so that you're fully aware and fully prepared to go through the review for the test. If I don't think you're prepared with that review sheet on Tuesday, what will happen? I won't review it with you. You'll have a test, okay? So let's make sure we work on that seriously. Now, kids, you know me well enough, don't you, that review I'm going to give you Monday is probably what? Probably what's going to be on the test, okay.